Students, we're back together again. Good to be with you today. This is going to be a very quick little lecture on some of the behavior therapies that we'll be talking about. But what I want to make sure that you know right away is that tomorrow, it would be Wednesday, the 7th of April, you need to join my class live because I want to make sure we understand all of the therapies before we get into drug therapy. So by today, we'll be pretty much through the therapies, but I want to make sure we really get all the therapies that we've talked about until this time. Wednesday are a little bit shortened class periods, so I will make sure that the team's times are correct. Anyway, so here we go. We talked about this slide the other day. Remember Carl Rogers? He's unconditional positive regard. Now we're looking at more client-centered therapy. Then we get to, of course, Abraham Maslow, and Abraham Maslow had the hierarchy of needs, and we know we have to meet those hierarchy of needs. But in therapy, the way we do that is obviously with insight learning, but also active listening, where you're truly listening to the person in kind of a give and take relationship. If you think about that insight learning, you're thinking about why you can't get to that next level. So that's kind of how humanistic therapy works. Okay, so now I want to talk about behavior therapy. Now, right away, you should think Watson, Pavlov, Pavlov, did it work? Watson, Pavlov, Skinner. Skinner is operant conditioning. Pavlov was classical conditioning. So if we're talking classical conditioning techniques, we're looking at things like phobias or sexual dysfunctions can be replaced. We can take this phobia, mine for instance, merophobia, and replace it with a more like constructive, what's the word? Constructive behavior. So, for instance, we're got a parrot. Oh, yeah. Can I do this? Let me see if I can figure this out for you. I'm going to do this right here. So, do you remember how we have to pair it, right? Don't forget this little chart. We got the unconditioned stimulus. Oh boy, this is bad. It's going to bring about an unconditioned response, right? You remember that. But that's just basic, right? It's not been conditioned. Well, for me, for some reason, something has been conditioned in me. We have a neutral stimulus, and if we pair that with another stimulus, we can get a conditioned stimulus. And so for me, if I need to be trained out of my phobia, I have got to start associating. I got to make that pair. I got to make that association between my issue of those little things and something pleasant, something I like. And so if I can make that association, then the conditioned response, oh boy, not a G, that's a C. The conditioned response is going to be much better. I'm going to change that dysfunction. I'm going to change that behavior because I've associated it, I've paired it, and then I can respond appropriately and not the way I tend to respond. So classical conditioning can work, but remember in classical conditioning, I don't make those changes. Somebody else is doing those changes for me. Somebody else is changing what's the word? The stimulus. I don't get to choose. I don't get to make that. And so then it's very like, well, I'm just being manipulated, right? So then we need to look probably at counter conditioning. So counter conditioning is just this right here with little Albert. I'll go back to the view here. Remember Remember little Albert, right? And this is Watson, correct? So Watson was successfully able to scare little Albert, right? And now look at that poor child. He's scared of the bunny. Well, in counter conditioning, he could actually reverse it. He could get him to be not scared of the bunny. When time after time, he would pair it with something he enjoyed. Maybe for little Albert, it was a bottle or a blanket or something soothing or whatever it might have been. So he could like counter condition him to get a new response. He was able to condition him to be afraid of the rabbit. Then he was able to condition him to be not afraid of the rabbit. So those are all classical techniques. If we look at operant conditioning, and there, that little chart right there is a really good one to understand. Remember, operant, you're the operator, you're the one controlling it. In classical conditioning, somebody else is controlling it, and you don't really have a say in it because they're manipulating your behavior. There's a little bit more on counter conditioning. I will have to feel like those of you who had done your presentations and probably cognitive behavior, or if you had any of the phobias, that you might have come across this idea of exposure therapy. Now, exposure therapy is kind of like my nightmare. This systematic desensitization where you are exposed to whatever that phobia is, whatever it's making you is scared. And sometimes it might even be virtual reality exposure. So they had put like these goggles on me and I'd be watching, you can see that. I'd be watching that and I'm like looking at images and they're putting me in there and I'm around all those things and I feel like it probably would work, but even the thought of it makes me just about ill. So we're gradually, remember little by little, we're gradually getting to replace that phobia of what we're afraid of, little by little, successive approximation, to get to a more relaxed behavior, state of mind, and how we respond. Virtual reality, this is through electronic stimulations that progressively expose people to their fears. And so little by little, bit by bit, remember, successive approximation. We can't do it all at once. Flooding, that's what it's called, flooding. That doesn't tend to work because that actually tends to heighten the fear. But if we can do it systematically, little by little, bit by bit, this works very well in people who have a phobia of dentists. People who have real problems going to the dentist. This can work very well. PTSD, in fact, I can't tell. I don't think that man has, they're called BDUs, battle dress uniforms. I don't think that man has a military uniform on, but it might be. We've found that they have really good success with patients who have PTSD, especially returning from wartime experiences, that exposure therapy, especially virtual reality exposure, can help. So you'll hear the gunshots, you'll hear the explosions, you'll be in that convoy or whatever it is that is triggering those fears. And little by little, bit by bit, you can start to overcome those fears and deal with the anxiety of whatever it is that you experienced. Okay, so I think actually we're going to stop right here because I want to talk about cognitive behavior therapy tomorrow with you. We got to talk about Aaron Beck. I mean, look at this guy. Aaron Beck is such a gem. He just looks like a perfect teddy bear there. Anyway, so until we meet again tomorrow, I need you to join with the class live. And if you have questions, if there's anything you want to go over, tomorrow will be the time to do it. So, till then, goodbye.